So good evening, everyone, and welcome. Tonight marks a meaningful moment for the Ruderman Family Foundation as we shine a spotlight on the importance of mental health awareness and acceptance in the entertainment industry. This important event is dedicated to enhance our call for action around destigmatizing mental health and increasing access to programming and services for young adults with mental health issues and diagnosis. For the past 7 years, the Ruderman Family Foundation has remained steadfast in our commitment to raising awareness and eliminating the stigma associated with mental health. Through strategic and impactful collaborations with key stakeholders across sectors, we have crafted programs and initiatives that uplift the well-being of our communities and offer support for those dealing with mental health issues. We continue to advocate for policy change, partnering with esteemed institutions and vital stakeholders to promote greater access to services, programming, and knowledge about mental health, because knowledge is power. Our partnership with the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences began 4 wonderful years ago, leading the work to promote disability inclusion in the entertainment industry. Since then, we have expanded our joint efforts to empower individuals with mental health issues through a range of initiatives. These initiatives foster fresh perspectives on mental health, offer an inclusive experience for audiences from all walks of life, and aim to change the culture in the industry. Together, we have created a change in the environment where aspiring young filmmakers, regardless of their background or abilities, find their place in the entertainment industry, leading to a more inclusive and diverse industry over time. Tonight, we have the privilege of learning from an esteemed panel of individuals who are leading the conversation on mental health and offer leading mental health initiatives across the entertainment industry. We hope that tonight's event will encourage all of us to think about mental health in our lives and in our communities in new ways, spark new ideas, and deepen our commitment to expanding access to mental health services in the film industry. Together, we aim to help the industry integrate the importance of mental health, generate new policies, elevate discourse, and offer tools for aspiring and current filmmakers, actors, directors, crew members, basically everyone who is involved in the creative process, both in front and behind the camera. On behalf of the leadership of the Ruderman Family Foundation, I want to express our gratitude to all of you for joining this important conversation. We would like to extend our appreciation to the Foundation staff involved in organizing tonight's event and to the hardworking partners we have at the Academy, including some like Bill Kramer, Don Murray, Bettina Fisher, Janelle English, Kendra Carter, and everyone at the Academy who remain dedicated to this issue. It is an absolute honor to collaborate with all of you on such a meaningful initiative. Thank you.
Okay, so let's get this conversation started. Please join me in welcoming our moderator for this panel to the stage. Madhuri Jha is a nationally recognized clinical social work and public health professional with experience providing thought leadership, training, education, consultation, and direct clinical practice to programs focused on mental health equity, behavioral health systems, strengthening trauma and resiliency, mental health epidemiology, and community capacity building. That is a lot. Thank you. Wow. She is also a practicing psychotherapist and serves as the Vice President of Science, Equity, and Integration at ETR, which stands for Education, Training, and Research Associates, a national organization focused on advancing health equity, and outcomes for children, families, and communities. Please welcome to the stage Madhuri Jha.
Good evening, everybody. As I was graciously introduced, my name is Madhuri. I use she, her pronouns, and it's my distinct honor to be your moderator tonight for this incredibly important panel. I want to just say thank you again to the Ruderman Family Foundation and to the Academy for not only inviting me, but for choosing to do an event like this, where I'm often asked to speak, and it's rarely a platform where we can reach so many different types of people, and also an industry that I think this really will speak volumes to. We live in unprecedented times. Nearly 1 in 5 Americans in the last year reported symptoms of depression. Suicide is now the leading cause of death in people aged 20 to 34 and kids aged 10 to 14. The COVID-19 pandemic resulted in a rise in demand for mental health services like we've never seen before. I myself, as Janelle graciously said, I'm a practicing clinician. I served on the front lines of COVID-19's pandemic response in New York City as the director of a mobile psychiatry unit in New York at its peak. What I can tell you is that it was the most humbling and life-defining moment of my career, because it showed me personally just how much work we have to do to normalize and destigmatize discussions about mental health. The film industry has its own unique challenges, where evidence shows us that extreme pressure and arduous work environments, as well as sometimes the thematic and dramatic content themselves of many productions, can be risk factors for someone to experience emotional distress on the job or in their profession if they can't have their needs addressed. And we are certainly having this conversation tonight in recognition and in memoriam of many in the industry who have sadly lost their battle with mental illness because they couldn't reach out for help or couldn't get it in time. I would not be a responsible clinician to all of you here presently, but also those who are listening on our live stream, that this conversation may get intense. If at any point you feel you need to take a break, whether you are watching this at home to turn your screen off or put the computer down, or if we're here too, you need to take a breather, please do so and take care of yourself. Know that this panel here sees you and validates your experience. So I ask you as an audience to go on a journey with us as we're going to unpack how the filmmaking industry can champion mental wellness and safety in this industry through the lived experiences and expertise of this incredible panel. Without further ado, it's my honor to introduce you to each of our panelists. Our first panelist is an Emmy Award-winning film and television veteran known for his powerful portrayal of the popular character Sonny Michael Corinthos Jr. on the award-winning series General Hospital. Maurice Benard's enduring talent and commitment extend beyond the screen as he champions mental health awareness through his own personal journey with bipolar disorder and his advocacy work with esteemed organizations such as the International Bipolar Foundation and the National Alliance for Mental Illness. Please welcome to the stage Maurice Benard. Our next panelist is a writer, director, musician, and mental health advocate. He also is inspired by his own journey with bipolar disorder. Paul Dalio's debut film, Touched with Fire, challenges stigmas and explores the creative aspects of mental illness. With a critically acclaimed album and upcoming projects, including a rap musical film, he continues to shed light on mental health and challenge societal norms. Please welcome to the stage, Paul Dalio. Our next panelist is a renowned mental health and addiction consultant, speaker, and author. With expertise in cultural responsiveness and health equity, his newly published book is garnering praise for its insights on creating high-performing, equity-centric healthcare organizations. Dr. Pierluigi Mancini's impactful work has earned him prestigious awards, including multiple Emmy honors. And he continues to advocate for social justice and mental health on national and international platforms. Please welcome to the stage my good friend, Dr. Pierluigi Mancini. Our next panelist is the founder and CEO of Dive Studios and the Mindset app. As a prominent figure in the digital media landscape, Brian Nam has built Dive Studios into a leading platform for Asian American and global K-pop audiences, with their podcast and video series amassing over 750 million views. With the recent introduction of Mindset, a self-care app targeting Gen Z, Brian aims to make a lasting positive impact by fostering a sense of community and providing valuable content to millions of active users. Please welcome to the stage, Brian Nam. Next, a mental health nurse practitioner, psychotherapist, and influential social media content creator with over 2 million followers. Through his engaging videos and content, Dr. Kojo Sarfo promotes mental health awareness, using popular trends in music to educate viewers about mental health conditions and the importance of self-care. Please welcome to the stage, Dr. Kojo Sarfo. Our next panelist is a multi-talented actress, director, and producer. From her recent directorial debut in the independent film Parachute to her notable roles in films like Pitch Perfect and Someone Great, She has captivated audiences with her versatile performances. Additionally, Brittany Snow is an advocate for mental health awareness and the founder of September Letters, a a therapeutic writing experience in collaboration with the Mental Health Foundation, with a book set to release in 2023. Please welcome to the stage Brittany Snow. And last but certainly not least, our last panelist is an actress, singer, filmmaker, and advocate for change. Recognized for her impactful performances in series like Little Fires Everywhere and Cruel Summer, and the comedic science fiction series Will versus the Future. Lexi Underwood continues to captivate audiences with her versatile talent. Additionally, she's the founder of Ultimate Dreamer Productions and an avid supporter of various organizations utilizing her voice to raise awareness on issues affecting girls and youth worldwide, such as mental health, anxiety, hunger, and bullying. Please welcome to the stage Lexi Underwood. Thank you all so much for being with us tonight. I am excited to get into these questions that we've curated for you, which include some questions we solicited ahead of time from our Gold Rising audience. And some of them are specifically for each of you based on your experience, your expertise, but I do want to say that if you want to chime in for any of these, just give me a signal. And we want this to be a conversation that hopefully feels enriching, empowering, inspiring for all of us. Should we get started? So I'm going to start with our subject matter experts, Dr. Sarfo and Dr. Mancini. For our audience, let's start with you, Dr. Sarfo. Can you tell us how mental health conditions can impact daily life?
Yeah, so before I start, I just want to thank the Academy Gold Program and the Ruben Family Foundation for having us here tonight. And that's a great question. When you think of mental health conditions, if you're somebody who struggle with any type of mental health struggle, you know that it'll dominate your life. And let's start off with depression. That's the leading cause of disability worldwide, and it costs people a lot of things. You lose friends, you lose a lot of income, you lose sometimes yourself. And when you look at the signs and symptoms of depression, a lot of times people will lose energy. You won't be as motivated. You'll feel like you want to isolate. And with men, sometimes we'll overwork ourselves. We'll rely on substances more than usual. And even for people who don't have mental health conditions, I sometimes worry for those people, because if you don't fall within a certain category, it's easy for people to forget about you. And things like loneliness. Since the pandemic, I feel like we're in an epidemic with loneliness, where we don't have the connections that we used to. And I tell all my friends who live here in Los Angeles that if you have one person who will take you to LAX, you're blessed, because we're not as connected as we used to be. So just having good friends around, because we're in a city where we all came here for a reason, and we want to connect, but that connection isn't as strong as it used to be. So anytime you feel sad or you feel frustrated, I think that's a great time to just check in with yourself and see how you're doing.
Thank you. You brought up something that's really important. For the first time ever, the United States Surgeon General released a report on social isolation and loneliness as a national epidemic, which is wild to think that we're there. Dr. Mancini, if you could elaborate for us a bit, because you're an expert in understanding inequity and systems access and what access really means for folks. Help us understand what that means.
Thank you, Madre, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for taking time of your day to be here with us and those that are watching online. So the part I wanted to answer for that question, which is so important, is that not only if we have a condition, but then what are those barriers that continue to affect us? Because if I'm aware I have a condition and I have nowhere to go, it's suffering in silence. It's suffering more than I have to. And if you close your eyes for a second, if you're comfortable with that, and I were to kind of define for you, when we talk about physical health, we have this whole process, right? We know how we're changing. We see our body change. We see our attitude change. It's very concrete. But when we talk about mental wellness, there is no concrete. How do you see your brain get stronger? How do you see your emotions get stronger? So if I'm suffering from a condition, but then I don't have access, it makes things even worse. Now, for me to be able to have access, I have to also unpack with the barriers to access. So we have inequities, and inequities means how come I can have a therapist, but other folks have to wait 6 months to get a therapist? How come I have one in my block, and then others have to go across counties and drive sometimes multiple hours to find someone? And even though we have telemedicine today, I don't have internet access where I live, right? So we have to address those issues. There are financial barriers. If I find someone, then that's another inequity. Maybe I don't have the insurance coverage, I don't have the copay, I don't have the ability to buy my medications. So what happens when I don't have access? When I don't have access, I suffer. And I suffer in many ways. I suffer physically. I don't sleep well. I don't eat well. I don't take care of myself. I don't want to get out of bed. I suffer with my friends. I don't want to see people. I want to isolate, and I have a hard time even taking care of my personal hygiene. My job suffers. I'm not able to behave at the maximum ability that I'm able to. So when we look at those things, we have to be able to say the ability to recognize a condition, which is the most normal thing today. We need to normalize the conversation about having a mental health condition. And there is a difference between a mental health condition and a mental illness, and we also have to learn about those. But then I have to be able to have the people that can help me take me to that other side. Because the reality is, anybody that has suffered or is suffering today, you're not alone. You have millions and millions of people that are successfully living with a mental health condition or a mental illness because we're able to get the help that we need when we need it.
Some of the things you brought up make me think about, just how much of a hustle it is to try and make it in this industry. I've worked with a lot of performers, and issues of insurance and access are hugely important. So I want to come to our actors on the stage to talk to you all a little bit about what comes up for you when you hear our experts outline how symptoms can affect day-to-day life. And what makes you want to be a part of a conversation like this? I think that'd be really meaningful for our audience. So I'll start here. Maurice, if you can tell us a little bit about.
Well, it's funny that he said that about therapy during the pandemic. As much as I've been talking about mental health for over 30 years, but I couldn't get a therapist for 4 months, and I was at a point of no return. The way I was feeling, finally got therapy, saved my life. So it's even now, I think sometimes it is very difficult to get therapy, and it could somebody could die in a second.
Let's go to the other side. Lexi, tell us what's coming to mind for you.
Yeah, number one, for me, I'm a big advocate of therapy, just not even as an actor, as an artist. Just the world in general is very chaotic, and it's important to be able to have that safe space that you can go to with a judgment-free zone, to be able to share. But I think for me, particularly, a big thing that, I had to get over, especially as an artist as well, was giving myself like just the permission to be vulnerable and to be myself and to operate in spaces like I usually do around my friends and all the things that I was scared of and worried about. I think that, we're constantly on sets or in different rooms that may seem a bit intimidating or scary. But I finally took myself, gave myself a moment and realized that I needed to give myself more grace, and I need to give myself the space to be vulnerable and to make mistakes. And when I'm more kind to myself, it definitely makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah, kindness and forgiveness are themes I think we'll talk about a lot today. Paul, you've been really public about your experience. I'd love to hear from you what it's been like for you in this industry.
Well, I had a mixed experience with the release of the film, because the film, for me, was very poignant because I was trying to do a movie that kind of showed the gifts of it, and showed the beautiful aspects of it. And so I made the whole color scheme around my biggest bipolar hero, Vincent Van Gogh. And we actually did the first interactive experience as the people in the hospital start to see like the stars projected on the walls around him. And I was really hoping that, like my biggest hope was to kind of show things through the eyes of someone who has it, so they don't judge it as much. They might actually see the beauty in it, because so for me, when I released the film, the poignant moment for me was that it didn't make any money, and I couldn't get another movie off the ground. But then like 12 mental health organizations reached out to me, telling me what an impact it had on their communities, and how, and suddenly I found myself, like in a Motel 8 with Kevin Hines, who jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge, and we're going to speak with, high schools of auditoriums of suicidal kids, and I'm running the marathon for NAMI, and it's just like I suddenly found that the most poignant thing for me was the wound, the shared wound. Like when you're suddenly in a, with these people who like lost their kids, like, I mean, and they're asking you about why they committed suicide, and you're trying, like when you're in those kind of situations, to me, it was the wound, the common wound that we shared with a lot of the people who actually saw the film. And but for me, the biggest, it was a little bittersweet for me seeing when the Van Gogh exhibits came out, because the Van Gogh exhibits came out. I was like, oh yeah, now everyone's gonna be able to see Van Gogh. Everyone's gonna see those stars the way he saw them, and there was nothing mentioned about his mental illness. And I was like, this is the one opportunity we have to really show the beauty in this person who no one appreciated because he was such a weirdo. At the time, no one would buy his art. And the funny thing was, the difference between him and Gauguin. Gauguin was this really charismatic, charming guy who, like, wanted to be wild. He wanted what Vincent Van Gogh had. And he would get so annoyed at him, be like, well, you can't make things in such quick strokes. You got to, put the fine. No one saw the beauty that he had. And he had a quote that really moved me, which was, who am I in the eyes of most? What am I in the eyes of most? An eccentric, someone who has no position in society and will never have. All right, even if that were absolutely true, I would like to one day show by my work what such a nobody has in his heart. But he still never got to show it, because even when he's hanging in the pinnacle of prestige in the MoMA, everyone's going to leave and they're going to see some guy with bloodshot eyes, homeless on the street. They're not going to know that the same magic is happening in those eyes.
Yeah. That's really beautiful. And Brittany, you've certainly used your platform and decided to turn it into something that you want to make an impact on. Tell us about what you're hearing and what comes to you about why it's important for people to speak out.
I guess it's important to speak out because I think everyone has a platform in some way. I think it's just a matter of what kind of job you do, but everyone has mental health and everyone has a story to share. And I really find, for me, the thing that has helped me the most, or that I've found the most valuable, is that shared connection, that shared understanding that we are more alike than different, and mental health is the great equalizer in that. I think that it doesn't, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, bipolar, anything, doesn't matter where you came from or what you look like or what job you have. This is a part of all of our DNA. And so when I think, as like people who make movies, it's important for us because we do get, and we're so blessed to do this, we have the opportunity to share this story in whatever capacity we can, whether it be writing a movie about it or just going on social media and talking about it. I think that's the connective tissue that is so important for someone to see themselves. There's this great Julianne Moore quote where she says, you don't go to the movies to see a character, you go to the movies to see yourself. And I think that that's what we need to do with mental health, is knowing that we're really just all just trying to find each other and see ourselves in each other. And so that's why I think it was important for me to make a movie about mental health, because I wanted a little girl, like I did when I was little, looking for a movie and to see herself.
Yeah, and all of you are talking about the power of community. So I want to pull Brian into this conversation because there's a lot around cultural responsiveness, as our experts talked about, what it means to be seen as an individual. You decided to use your audience and create Mindset app. I'd love for you to tell our audience a bit about what the app does, what it means to you, why you wanted to do it, and where you hope it takes people in this industry.
Yeah. I think it'll be helpful to give kind of context on how we even got there. So, as you mentioned, I started a company called Dive Studios about 4 years ago with my brother, who's also a K-pop artist. His name is Eric Nam, and at that time, we pretty much just set out to create the first ever media company that focused on K-pop content and talk show formats. So having K-pop artists open up, just talk about who they are. And I know there's some stigmas around kind of K-pop being very sheltered, and so we wanted to kind of peel back the layers and kind of show them as human beings. And so we launched that 4 years ago, and very quickly it really took off. And today it's still going. We're doing 60 million unique viewers a month. But very early on into Dive Studios, we were really curious about why it was doing so well. And so we created a Discord community, which is now about 60,000 members. And we just started talking with our community. Like, why are you guys coming to our shows? It's not the highest quality content. It's like shot on like our iPhones. And what we were hearing was that people were so thankful to have a platform where they could hear people they look up to talk about very human things. Talk about being bullied in high school, growing up Asian American, dealing with stress, anxiety, depression. And that's kind of where we were like, I think there's something here for us to provide more of that value. And so we started talking to more of them. We're like, what if we created a platform that was fully dedicated to this type of storytelling? And so we launched Mindset about 2.5 years ago. And it's essentially a wellness app that's rooted in storytelling with community that's kind of powering it all. So, today we're close to 1 million users. We've had the pleasure of working with some of the biggest K-pop names out there. So 17 to G Idol, DPR, and then also a lot of artists based in the States. So like Tori Kelly, Summer Walker, Amine, Black, everyone coming on to talk about their own mental health journeys. And so I think that's all to say, like it came from a place of need, not necessarily us kind of like, playing it out and be like, oh, we're going to create this mental health app, but just listening to our audience, which is primarily Gen Z, and just seeing that there's a need for this kind of joint discussion around very important topics. And so that's kind of what has brought us up till today. And we're still going, we're growing. And I think what's been really great is we've been doing these events on college campuses now, where we kind of bring together communities like this, invite celebrity speakers, and then kind of have that mindset experience in person. So,
congratulations. That's awesome. That's so great. But I also want to say, too, I think of like, I get frustrated. My boss often uses this phrase of what it's like to build a plane while you're flying it. And I can't help but think about what this means for us here as a community. And I want to just highlight a question one of our Gold Rising participants wanted us to ask, which I think is valuable here. And this is for anybody, but also our subject matter experts, are there accommodations or support systems that you believe this industry should do better to implement for individuals with certain types of disabilities or a disclosed mental health condition? And how can this audience be better about advocating for those kind of accommodations? Do you want to go? You have your.
Okay. I think, especially people with such public platforms and images, it can be very daunting to, I think, open up about mental health issues. And so I think kind of the first step is really normalizing these conversations, having events and safe spaces like this to talk about these things. A lot of the artists we've worked with, some have, like Julia Michaels said, Mindset was like a therapy safe space for her. And I think that's really important. But then also when I talk to some other artists, they don't know where to go. Even my brother Eric, he struggled a lot with mental health in Korea. And one thing that he's very open about is in that industry, to have a mental health issue or illness, it is a very strong stigma. And even his label, his company would tell him, don't go see a therapist because people will hear about it and then your image is ruined. And so I think, that may be an extreme case, but I think really normalizing conversations and the use of mental health resources and then also providing those resources is a crucial element to people in this industry. Especially, we all know how, I think, how stressful it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So, thank you, Brian. I think that was excellent. I think to unpack a little bit of that, when you talk about normalizing the conversation, it just means it should be like anything else. If I hurt my finger, if I hurt my knee, if I'm having a day where I'm not feeling well, it should be perfectly normal to do that. Now, this industry is extremely powerful at all levels, and I remember cases where when an actor would have an issue, they would be called troublemakers, or nobody would want him because they would be unreliable, right? So I think that the industry does have a lot of power to be able to take care of the talent, to take care of their actors, directors, writers, who are human beings who may have an issue, just like if we had a cold, or if I am ended up being diagnosed with cancer. The other part about normalizing the conversation is we need to learn the language of mental wellness. We need to stop saying that person is schizophrenic, right? We don't identify the person with the illness. The illness is something different. We need to be able to say a person that has been diagnosed with a schizophrenia, right? So we need to separate those things. We need to make sure that the person remains that individual, that human being, and not something that we want to make sure that we put a label on just so we don't have to deal with them, right? And we can set them apart. So that's part of what normalizing the conversation and what this industry can do. And the other part is on how you portray. So I applaud a lot of the actors and directors and writers that do place in movies and shows the proper way to describe someone that is having a mental health condition or a mental illness, because it does make a difference in breaking that stigma when we properly portray the individuals that are suffering from these conditions.
Please.
You know, I started 30 years ago in General Hospital, and they asked me if they could have the character be bipolar, because I'm bipolar. And I said yes. And I've been doing it for 30 years. I think the problem is that it's such an invisible thing. You don't see anxiety. You don't see depression. I've gone into work literally with anxiety that I was going to it was the worst. I was crying in a corner. But nobody can see that. And then about a month later, I got cut here. And people went like, oh my God, you're going to, they're going to cut your arm off. So I think as people who have mental illness, we have to verbalize it. We have to tell people that what they're feeling, what's going on. Otherwise, you don't really see that, right?
I want to highlight though that that's really hard to do, right? I mean, so I think Lexi, you used the word vulnerability, and I think it's important to talk about what it means to lead with vulnerability. I think it's a leadership skill that's really undervalued, but it's also really hard to do. It takes a lot of courage. I'm wondering if some of you could just share what it means to share yourself, right? And things that our audience can take away as a comfort about the risk that they may feel they would have to take if they say something, right? Or if they disclose, or what that feels like.
I'll go on this one. I think by the way, tonight's a great first step. Just having all of us here talking about this. I didn't know that this was possible, that, we can have people here, with the Academy talking about mental health. But I think just sharing your story, is going to create that safe space for people to be themselves. And, I'll talk online about having ADHD. It's something that I knew I had as a kid, but, being in a African household, it doesn't exist, right? So I tell my mom, and she's like, just keep praying. And I'm like, I'm praying to the wrong God, because I'm, still failing these classes. Uh, and it was actually a Braves game where I was watching the Braves game, and the first baseman, Adam LaRoche, made an error. And then we lost the game to the Nationals, and then he got benched. And then after the game, he said he had ADD and he struggled with this thing, and that's why he had the mental lapse during the game. And I think it was very helpful for me. I was in 7th grade in Atlanta, Georgia, watching that game, and that kind of gave me the confidence to talk about it. And when you talk about, your struggles, it lets other people come out and talk about their struggles. It's kind of like that icebreaker, because before you speak up, like, people just kind of quiet and just looking around. But once you say something, then somebody will say, "Oh, I have bipolar, I have depression, anxiety," and then you can create that safe space where it's okay to talk about it. And also, as artists, I feel like we have and content creators and actors and musicians, we have a responsibility to not only ourselves but also to other people to accurately portray, mental health conditions when we make our art. And when I came here, 2.5 years ago, time is flying. And I started my entertainment company, and I decided to take social media to the next level. I made it a goal to portray these things accurately. So if I'm making a skit about somebody having a manic episode, you have to treat them with grace and respect, and you have to show that it's not the worst thing in the world. Some people enjoy that more than the depression. You know, if you have bipolar, you might relate to that. So I think it's important to share. And even my DP who's sitting there in the front row, it's his birthday, by the way. He, yeah, shout out to Thomas. When I was looking for like a videographer, we had like over like 100 applicants within the first hour, and my assistant like flagged his application because after he applied, he had like a paragraph. I don't know if he remembers where he was talking about how mental health is important to him, and I was like, we're gonna hire him. And like, you know, we still told him that we talked to other people, but I'm like, that's the person I want because he's gonna be authentic and vulnerable and open and honest. And I think once you create that safe space, especially as men, because we don't really talk about those things, it lets other people come out and talk about it. And once we have that in the industry, I think it will release some of the pressure that you know, creators have, because you know, I'm sure the actors can attest to it. If you have an audition or in a stressful event, you know, your agents, you know, they care about your mental health, but it might not be the main priority. Like you're thinking about making strong choices and showing up on time, but you might be having a panic attack in the car. So if we can start talking about these things, it's just going to make it easier for all of us.
Yeah, and sounds like thank you for being a first, right? All of you are a first, which is super hard to do. I can't help but think of Naomi Osaka, who's a professional tennis player, and she got fined for not wanting to do a media interview because she was feeling depressed after losing a match. And decided to take her platform and make that about mental health in sports, especially for women in sports. But that must have been really hard for her. I would love to hear from others, you know, what it feels like for you to lead with vulnerability. I don't know, maybe we can go down here.
Yeah. Well, as an actor, it definitely is a little scary. I think it's always scary just as humans, like when we're putting ourselves out there in a way in which we're not necessarily used to or comfortable having other people see us, especially when it comes to whatever fields, but specifically like if you're in the drama aspect and like I was saying, getting comfortable about being vulnerable in front of the screen, but also for me is getting comfortable about being vulnerable by myself as well and allowing myself to feel those things and go through the emotions. I think that especially when I was younger, I've been dealing with anxiety and depression since I was like 8, but I didn't necessarily know what it was. I just suppressed it, and I was not giving myself the space to allow it and to just let it be. I thought that there was something wrong with me or that I was doing something wrong, and I would say that it's just now within the past couple of years that I'm really allowing myself, not just on screen but also with my peers, with my family, to be open and to be vulnerable and to be raw because when I suppress those feelings, it doesn't feel good, and it only makes you, I feel like, especially if you are looking at yourself in a way, it makes you kind of resent yourself even more and resent the people around you that are kind of able to flow without, the fear of judgment or without, without the fear of judgment. And so it's a hurdle to get over as an artist and then also just as a person in general being comfortable with it. It's a journey, but I'm glad that I'm in this space now where I can be vulnerable with myself.
Totally. Brittany, I don't mean to call you in, but I do recall when we were taking pictures outside, we related because we're both people who are pretty public facing, and I hate having my picture taken, and you said that too, like that's the least favorite part. So I'd love for you to talk about what that feels like for you to also normalize that, right? There might be an expectation that you have to be okay with all aspects of the stress attached to the industry, and maybe some advice you could give on how you cope with those kinds of feelings that you deal with.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think what I've tried to reframe, and I think a lot of my mental health journey has been about reframing my self talk. I can view it in one way, or I can look at it from a different lens and a different perspective and see it another way. And so for a long time, I was really nervous and shy and anxious and sad. And why can't I speak in public? And why does my voice shake? And very self-conscious. And now I realize that it's a part of my superpower that I'm a super feeler and I feel everything. And especially when people are looking at me like now. So, and I think that's part of the great thing about being, creative and also being a good friend is being open and vulnerable and empathetic. And so, yes, taking pictures and things like that is a part of the job, but now I kind of try to reframe it in my brain of, but I don't know, creative and empathetic and look at the photographer or introduce myself to you and we have a conversation about this and we can connect in this way. And I really think that's been a huge part of my journey that I tried to encapsulate with my movie I wrote and directed, and then also with my charity, is that us sharing our vulnerability should be seen as a strength, and our stories are strong, even if they seem like they're faltering. I think that anyone who has a mental health journey and has any perspective on it has come a long way. And that's how we get better, as we connect on our vulnerability, because we're human and we all have it in some way.
So I'd like to switch a little bit to talk about what it means to portray someone who might have a mental health condition. We had a great question again from one of our participants in the Gold Rising program about what it means to accurately or empathically portray a character struggling with their mental health, whether that's something that they might have dealt with personally or not. Maurice, you talked about the fact that you disclosed and it became part of your role. But do you have examples of instances when you brought something to character in this way that wasn't explicitly on the script page, right? Because I think also like the concept of writing a role about something that you don't relate to, it's really complicated, right? I could never understand what it's like to be any of you, just like you couldn't understand what it's like to be me. So that's a great question. I'm wondering maybe, Maurice, we could start with you about what it meant to play somebody who also had bipolar.
Well, the problem with I loved it early on because I'm a method actor, so I said I'll play this bipolar, and I'm bipolar, so I'm gonna get right in it, right? And the problem was it's been fantastic for my acting, but not good for my life. So I'm struggling. Even I've been there 30 years doing this character, and it's just like it's painful to play those emotions and that depth of him being bipolar. I remember doing a scene one time and it went too long, and my wife called the producers, "You got to cut this now." And I said, "No, keep going." And I was in a scene and I heard my mom and dad talking in the scene. And I said, "Oh no." And that weekend, I woke up in the middle of the night and I thought I was having my fourth nervous breakdown, and I was having my first anxiety attack. But you got to make a living. you know? So it's what I do. You know what I mean?
But I think also, the fear of rejection is a big one. It's another question that came up with from one of our participants. Like that itself is so stressful. What if you get it wrong? What if you don't do the thing somebody wants to do, and that in itself can cause emotional distress, depression. Talk to us about how you combat that, and for our experts too, maybe how you've helped somebody navigate that in an effective way, so our audience can have some tools they can walk away with too.
Yeah, so I mean, when you talk about rejection, I think it's important. I've told, my patients back in the day on the East Coast when I was working, I would tell them that if somebody rejects you, that's their assessment of you, and other people's opinions of you doesn't really matter. And I think that's very important to keep in mind, especially in this industry, because things are very subjective. And when we put a lot of effort into a project or a video, even myself, if I post something and with social media, you get kind of spoiled. I was talking to someone earlier where I was saying that if a video doesn't get a million views, sometimes I'll just kind of pace around the house like, what was wrong with it, And
What?
yeah.
A million views.
We're spoiled. We're spoiled. I know. Like it'll be at 300,000. I'm like, why did it get stuck? But we have to reframe how we see things. It's embarrassing to even admit it, but yeah. So I'm always trying to, just be comfortable with who I am and just tell myself that, my best is always good enough. And as long as it comes from the heart, you should be, okay with that because, like tonight we're here at, with the Academy and like that's what, there's nothing bigger than that when it comes to acting. But even if you don't, if even you aren't recognized, you're still an artist. You're still somebody who's worthy of love, attention, and respect. So I think it's important to just create this community where we can give ourselves credit for just doing. Like the doing should be what we're proud of. Because if we're outcome based, I worry that the more outcome-based you are, you're going to put yourself at risk for depression, anxiety, and poor mental health outcomes. So it's important to keep that in mind.
Yeah, really great points there. I saw Pierluigi first, and then I'll come to you, Maurice.
So thank you for disclosing that you have videos with less than 1 million to an audience.
My cat videos get like 6 likes. So
One of the important things, though, is we can't do this by ourselves, right? So when we disclose about our conditions in the environment that we disclose it in, we need to make sure that we can either have the supports or we have the ability to build the supports that we're going to need. Because if someone, and again, it's about equity, right? Equity means fairness. It means that everyone, if someone is on set and they hurt their knee, there's a team that comes in and takes care of that knee. If someone is on set and they have a panic attack or they have an episode of depression, we don't have the people running in to take care of that, right? So we need to look at that equity. Now, people confuse that with equality. Equality means everybody gets the same thing. But equality only works if everyone begins at the same place and everyone has the same situation, which is not the fact. So we need to continue to work on equity. And if we're going to do this, we need to make sure that we either have the supports in place or that we have the ability to build those supports. So what does that mean? That means that everyone needs to play a role, right? So not only the actor, but the director, the producer, the writers, even the key grip or the lights, everybody needs to play a role to be able to support that individual, because it takes a lot of courage for someone to say that in today's environment where we do judge, where we do put a stigma, where we do keep people out because of something that we may not fully understand. And the reality is that there's millions of people that are living with a mental illness and are having a wonderful, successful life. But we need to continue to support that. And then let's not forget about the allies. Because sometimes, I often tell people, first we need to find our voice, right? You find your voice and you figure out how it is that you need to describe something or tell someone what it is that you're thinking. But then, once we find our voice, is our obligation to use our voice, because we may be the only ones that can be there for somebody, right? So the allies of those people that we surround ourselves with, they need to also be able to help us until we're able to stand up and we're able to speak up for ourselves.
thank you. Maurice, you were going to say.
Yeah, I just want to add on to what was said. I mean, one thing, it's taken me about 58 years to not care what people think. And in the last 2 years, I've been working on it a lot. And you can do it. And when you don't care what people think, you fly. And so I wish I had learned that when I was young, man. I think it would have been incredible. But anyway, it's very important to do that and try to have that.
Paul, you've had varying experiences. You were sharing a bit. What supports have worked for you? What do you think the audience could hear too about pushing themselves through something that might be helpful for them to seek out too?
I think having a different relationship with suffering is something that you have to do if you're bipolar. If you're bipolar like him and me, like I'm bipolar 1, you can't avoid suffering. You have to embrace it. You have to have a different kind of relationship with suffering. And it can go for as far as physical pain, you have to do things that other people don't have to do, like I fast. I've gone 8 days without food one time. I do cold showers. I do keto. I do light box. I do intense exercise. Just stuff that other people don't have to do. You have to do, and you just have to face it and just embrace pain. The other thing is to embrace suffering, emotional suffering. You can't avoid suffering if you're bipolar. One of the most beautiful characters for me is Dionysus. Because Dionysus, one of the first books they gave us when we were at the dramatic writing program was Aristotle's Poetics, and what people were always like shocked about was the way Aristotle described tragedy as being the most ecstatic art form, the highest art form, and the highest feeling of spiritual enlightenment came from witnessing these tragedies. And they would bring out a statue of Dionysus, because Dionysus is the god of madness. He's the god of madness, and he's the god of tragedy. But they would bring out the statue of Dionysus on the day of the Greek plays, when they would, because he represented embracing suffering and bringing beauty to it through art. And he was able to, in his madness, they would say, the spirit of Dionysus can turn that suffering into wine, and beauty. And that's the kind of relationship you have to pain and suffering, whether if you're bipolar. That's just all there is to it.
Yeah. And there's been some comments too about what it means to like make it unique for you, right? And what that feels like. And Brian, like you alluded to as well, the impact you're having in the Asian American community and in the K-pop industry. I can't imagine what that feels like too, to also carry a weight on your shoulders about being the person facilitating those messages. If you can talk about what that's felt like for you.
Yeah, I think, for us, I think to start, like when we talk to our community or even publicly, like we're very upfront about, these are stories. We're not working with public figures to say that they have the solutions to solving your mental health issues, but simply leading with storytelling. And I think, when we first started out, people said that we were crazy, like mental health K-pop. Like there's just no way that ever happens. But I think what we saw is that you get one person to take that first step, to kind of be the first one on the platform, to show that we can share these stories in a way that's, that's safe, that's non-triggering, but also helpful to their fans. And I think one by one, we started working with more and more artists. And I think that has been the biggest pressure of continuously doing right by the talent and making sure that their stories are delivered in a way that that they're happy with. And so we're very upfront that they have 100% creative control. We've had some people that have recorded 13 episodes and then last minute they're like, I'm not ready to release this. And so we just haven't released it. So that, I think for us, it's always leading with the talent first approach. And I think for us, like, to your question of like, what's the weight been? I think honestly, it's really on all the people we're working with. I'm just lucky to be able to kind of help facilitate it. But yeah, I think it's all the applause and kind of just shout out to them for even being the ones to share their stories.
Yeah. And the weight is there, right? I mean, if it didn't feel weight, I always say if it doesn't feel uncomfortable, you're not doing it right. But also, like, if you don't feel weight about these things, then we're devaluing what our emotions are and what they feel like. And I'm hopeful the two of you on the end too could maybe tell us like what's worked for you, and if you have some examples that could be helpful for our audience.
What has worked for me when it comes to moments of not necessarily feeling enough. A big thing that my mom like used to tell me when I was younger, because I've experienced panic attacks for quite a while. So she used to tell me basically in those moments of self-doubt, to look myself in the mirror every day and tell myself I love you. And if you do that consistently, at least once a day, that it only reinforces in yourself how you're going to allow other people to treat you, how you treat other people, and how you treat yourself. And so by doing that, in the moments where I don't necessarily feel like I know what's going on, or I feel like I'm, losing my mind, I kind of just remind myself that I am enough, and that I do matter. Things like also meditation are just so big for me. I think that it's so easy, especially with what we do, to just get caught up in everything, especially social media, to compare. We were talking about rejection as well, to take it to heart and to feel as though it's a personal issue, but in my opinion, rejection is protection. And so if you continue to instill that in yourself and just give yourself at least like 15 to 20 minutes a day, just pure solitude and allowing yourself to be and sit with your thoughts and your emotions, that definitely has helped me get through, and jump over the hurdles that I've experienced when it comes to mental health.
Can you repeat the question of which
Yeah,
question
what's
is
worked
it?
for you?
Oh, what's worked
So, yeah.
in general?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh gosh, how much time do we have? I mean, I think I think, you know, I started on my mental health journey, I guess, when I was 12 years old, and I read an article in a magazine about a girl who was going through what I was going through, and it sort of, you know, connected me to that. I think what's really important for me is having a toolbox of things, because like we were saying, not everyone has access to therapy. Not everybody also wants to go to therapy, and not definitely can't afford to talk to a therapist every single day. I know I can't, and so, or nor do I want to. Sorry, no offense. So I think that there's a lot of different things that I think really work in order to have a toolbox of sorts of things that you can pull from when you just know that, oh, you're getting in that place again, and maybe it's a walk outside, a podcast, a bath, or something that you're doing for yourself to disconnect from the fact that I think that there's sometimes your your mental health mind that kind of is this ticker tape hamster wheel, and then also the loving adult voice in your head that says, no, 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 just listen to a nice song and reframe this and take a moment to understand that, like, maybe you don't have all the answers and you might need to, you know, take a second and like you said, press pause. I think that's been really helpful. But knowing how big your toolbox is and where it is, I think has been really impactful. And stuffing it with a bunch of stuff.
Stuffing it with a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, can I add something real quick?
Yeah, of course.
I just thought of this recently. As of late, I've been struggling with boundaries, you know, and during the pandemic, I went to therapy for the first time, and then my therapist kind of connected it to, you know, not being given choices as a child. So I couldn't be assertive, so it was harder as an adult. And the thing with boundaries is, you know, it's hard to enforce them with the people that you love because there's a chance that you could lose them. So as I've been struggling with this, you know, my brother's live with me now here in LA, and like I'll explain things to him, and what that does for me, it helps give me a why to my suffering. And we were talking about suffering earlier, and it's something that it's not gonna escape any of us in life. We're gonna have to suffer in some capacity, and I think it's important to give your suffering a why and understand that, all right, I'm suffering, but there's gonna be something that comes out of this that's productive for me. Because if you can't give your suffering a why, then you'll feel like you're just suffering endlessly, and I believe that could lead to hopelessness and helplessness. So when you realize that, okay, I'm struggling with this, but what kind of lesson can I extract from it, and not only help myself but help out other people, it kind of helps you out in the moment and also makes you feel better because you're helping out other people.
Well, I'd just like to take an opportunity to do something really quick before we close, unfortunately. But it is that I'd like each of you to think about one thing you wish you had known towards your mental health when you started in your career. And even for the folks who are maybe not actors, but that's an important lesson for everybody. So we're going to go down the row. We'll start here with you. What's one thing you wish you had known when you started that you know now?
I think I already said it. You know, if I had worked on not caring what people think and also chipping away at my ego, which got me in big trouble for many, many years, you got to get rid of that. And if I had known that earlier too, and how to do it, it would have made my life a lot easier.
Awesome. Paul.
I reflect a lot what he says about the ego, you know, because I think it's one of the things that when I made Touch with Fire, I was like so thinking, oh, I'm gonna make money off of this, I'm just gonna blow up, you know, and none of that happened. And suddenly, like 12 mental health organizations reach out, and I'm like in a motel with Kevin Hines. And I'm like, this is heaven, you know, and I'm like, what is this? Is what it's about. I wish I had known the purpose of why we make stories when I set out to do it, you know, because then I would have appreciated it all the more. You know, it's important to remember that.
Thank you. Dr. Munson.
I would say I'm not alone. I'm not alone, and it's okay. Whatever I'm going through, whatever feeling I have, it's okay. I'm not alone, and it's okay to ask for help.
Ryan.
Um, I'd say I wish I learned how to kind of label my emotions and kind of what I was going through at a younger age. I think growing up in a kind of Korean Asian American household, like my parents didn't know any of these terms, anxiety, depression, any of that. And I think I went through a lot of that in high school. And if I had kind of known that's what I was going through, I think I would have been able to embrace it and then kind of find solutions earlier. So I think being able to label kind of what you're going through, and then to Brittany's point about reframing kind of whatever it is you're going through, I think for myself and a lot of people I talk to, imposter syndrome is something that a lot of people struggle with. And I think for me, I still feel it even on this stage, and I think it's reframing it as like, it's a sign that you're pushing your boundaries. They're out of your comfort limit, and I think that's really helped me kind of get through those moments where it's really at its peak.
For me, I wish I would have really understood the importance of kindness. First of all to myself, because I really pushed myself hard, and that's how I've been my whole life. And even in high school playing football, like I loved like that aggressive nature of like just pushing yourself to exhaustion. So I think I wish I would have known the importance of being kind, and not only to myself but just to other people. Because everybody's going through something, whether they have a condition or not, and just by you reaching out and maybe giving them like a big Drew Barrymore hug, it could just make them feel like they're loved. So kindness is way more important than we give it credit.
I would have to say that I would tell my younger self to embrace who I am, because those things that I might dislike or try to change are actually my superpowers. And they are the things that as a kid, I was too this and not enough this and all these things, but that's what made me really strong and empathetic and creative. And so I would go back and really lean into those things, because you are who you are and everyone else is taken.
I would say number one that it's okay to not be okay, especially when I was younger and I first started experiencing all these feelings and emotions. Like I said it earlier, like I thought that I was crazy or that there was something wrong with me. But just being able to give myself the space to just be and understand that it's okay, and to bask in the moment, even if it's just like 15 minutes of crying and of having a panic attack, just allowing myself to sit in that space. And then I would also say when it comes to career is that comparison is the biggest thief of joy. um, I still find myself doing it sometimes. I think that as human beings, like it's just like a natural thing where if we go on social media, if we go somewhere, like we're gonna compare. But for when it comes to career specifically, I think that it's important that you're not like in a race. You're the only person that you're competing with yourself in a sense is you, and as long as you're making yourself proud at the end of the day, that's all that matters.
Thank you all. I'm going to do something off the cuff. Can everybody just take one big deep breath in and out together? I really want to thank our panelists and our experts for being so vulnerable and so candid, so smart, intelligent, powerful, amazing, all these things. You all embodied what vulnerability really means today. I can't stress this enough. It's a really undervalued skill. It's something I wish we all could have the courage to do. And I really thank you for being champions of mental health. Makes my job a lot easier when we have people like you choosing to do what you did today. So thank you so much. We get a big round of applause for our panelists, everybody. That concludes our panel for the evening. So thank you all so much. I will hand it over to closing to go through the logistics of how we end. But thank you.